Go to business news now with Nona Peltier, who's brought a lot of papers with you today, Nona.
Not that many, actually, just 4.
Must be a lot happening in the business news. Okay, let's start off with another survey that shows consumer confidence as well as trailing off again.
Yeah, pretty gloomy these days. And that's also because of, there's been a lot of talk about slower economic growth. That always flows through to consumer sentiment when consumers start to believe it, and they're starting to believe it. So we've gone backwards somewhat to what we've seen, I guess, the lowest level in 6 months. So basically, consumers are gloomy about everything, their outlook, their own outlook. Fewer want to buy a major appliance, although still quite a few, I guess, a net 43%. Still quite a few people are out there looking for major appliances. But, the sentiment is falling across the board. So a net near about a quarter of consumers expect to be better off financially, but that means the rest don't. So that's a lot of people who are expecting to be worse off.
So they're hunkering down, in essence, and not spending their spare cash.
Yeah, they're not. And their outlook is relatively gloomy. We've moved down a bit, and it's not just, current conditions, it's the future ones too. And generally, it's going to be hard for that to reverse, given, a lot of other indicators that are going on in the economy that are pointing to a slowdown here in New Zealand, but not just in New Zealand, globally as well.
Does the survey get an idea of what it is that is making them gloomy specifically?
It's hard to know. I mean, it could be housing. Because if a lot of people live in Auckland, house prices in Auckland are certainly sluggish. So sure, there have been some signs that things might pick up, but we haven't seen them yet. The government stimulus program for housing, not sure whether there was anything
Kiwi
in
Build.
the budget. Did you see anything there?
No, only for Housing First, the social housing policy,
okay.
Housing First.
Yeah, I didn't really study the housing part of it, but from what I read from economists and so on, they seem rather underwhelmed.
And no mention of Kiwi Build.
Right. And there's no sense that business sentiment will perk up either anytime soon. Certainly the people we've been talking to since the budget has been, the same old gloomy outlook. So can we talk ourselves into a recession or an economic downturn? Well, certainly we can. That's one sign that could potentially tip us that way. But so far we still have economic growth. We're still doing better than most of our counterparts in the world. So yes, sentiment's gloomy, but let's just see whether or not people go out there and buy those major appliances.
Interesting. Okay, so Commerce Commission now has indicated that it's not very likely to approve this infrastructure company, Infratel, plan to buy Vodafone. Now, what's the problem with that?
Well, they're a majority owner of Trustpower, which has interests in broadband, not just broadband, but energy and power and so on, because Infratel invests in utilities.
Yeah.
And broadband is a utility. Vodafone is arguably a utility because it's a mobile phone operator, right? And they are in the same space as Trustpower. So conceivably they're competitors, and therefore that would lessen competition. So the Commerce Commission has signaled that they would unlikely approve the deal if it went ahead in its current state. However, Infratel has previously indicated they'd be willing to sell their stake in Trustpower in favor of Vodafone.
They'd rather have Vodafone.
Well, I guess why not?
Interesting.
They would probably, look to sell that. So watch this space. We're looking at a decision sometime in July from the Commerce Commission on whether or not they would approve this merger, which would be with a Canadian asset management firm, joint investment. Infratel's looking to buy about 50% of Vodafone. It's a big investment. I'm sure it would be a flagship piece of their pie. Infratel owns a lot of assets, and so this would be another one.
And what's been going on the market ahead of a long weekend?
Interesting, though.
Really?
Because, Donald Trump couldn't stop himself from his tweeting. No, he had to tweet that he was going to slap some tariffs on some all Mexican imports into the United States. I think that was what I read on the Twitter feed. Shocking, really, because that was not expected. And basically, the investors did not like that. No. And that really put a damper on things. And the markets reacted as you would expect, with a lot of negativity, because there's a concern that with all this trade, tough talk on trade, the United States could very well tip not just itself, but the whole world into a recession because people are backing off. Even in China, there was some really disappointing economic indicators coming out of there, which also darkened the move further. So overall, you would expect, but did that affect us in our local market, you might ask? No, it didn't, as a matter of fact. Our local market rose 0.5%. That's the NZX Top 50 Index. 46 points up, to 10,118, which is an improvement from yesterday, which was down.
So are we not paying attention to Mr. Trump's Twitter feed, or do we feel insulated from it?
Well, maybe we don't care.
Yeah,
maybe we don't care. But if you were a Fisher and Paykel investor, you might, because they have a big factory there and they export from their Mexican firm, that factory, into the United States market, which is their biggest market. Counts for more than half of their income. So it could be a big deal for if you're a Fisher. And Fisher and Paykel is a very important company in New Zealand, may I add. Mm-hmm. So how they could diversify that, I don't know. It still was a shock to the market. They were not expecting that. Anyway.
Your dollars?
Our dollar is steady, holding steady, 65.1 US cents, 94.1 Australian, and 51.6 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Have a great long weekend if you're getting one.
I am, thank you.
Nona Pelletier with our business news this Friday.